My name's John McGurk, and today we're going to be talking about the F40. I've owned the car for 10 years. I've driven it about 20,000 miles over 10 years. Did a lot of the maintenance on the car myself, kind of do all the polishing and the polishing of the nuts and bolts and toothbrush type stuff with it. And but it's part of the family. The car. It's not something that you know. People always say, you know, are you going to sell it? Are you going to do this with it and that with it? And I just can't bring myself to do it. It's quite an emotional attachment. I'm a very, very lucky boy. I'm punching well above my weight to have something like this. And of course, 10 years ago, values were a very, very different thing. And so when I called my wife and we were talking about, you know, do you want to buy a second house, or are we, you know, what are we going to do? And I kind of rang up and said, actually, I've gone and done this, and it's been with us ever since. So, you know, that's the car. The F40 is so special for the same reasons as it would be for anyone and everyone. The whole poster pin-up car thing, yeah, absolutely. I remember when it was launched, I remember there was a video that went viral back in the day of this guy in, I think, Hong Kong or somewhere, driving on a public road doing, maxing the car out, sort of 300 kilometers an hour or what have you. And there was video footage of it, I remember, in Italy. Flames coming out the back, big rear wings. I mean, it was just, the car was just obscene. And it's always been such an interesting car to look at because there's so many, when you look at a car, when you look at panels on cars, and it's art, isn't it? You know, there's something going on with each panel. There's something interesting, vents, air intakes, badges, whatever. So anyway, so fast forward a bit, and I worked at a Ferrari dealer in Loughborough in the 90s, and of course at the time the cars were coming in for servicing and sales and what have you. And I was always in absolute awe of these things. And I remember there's a guy that worked there in the service department called Dash, and he was taking a car out for a road test, and I'd been leaping up and down saying, you know, take me out, as you do. And so he gave me a nudge one day and said, come on, let's go. So I strapped myself into the passenger seat of this car. It's like being strapped to a jet engine, and the takeoff is so aggressive that you just can't help but burst out laughing or whatever it is that you do. But it's the thrill of the rawness of the interior's no creature comforts. In terms of the way that it drives, it's aggressive, it's dangerous, it's a bit like, I like riding bikes, so I love my bikes, and it's a bit like you go out on a bike, or you're doing a track day or whatever you're doing, and you get home at the end of the day, you take your crash helmet off and you pat yourself on your back and you think, got away with that. And it's the same sensation with the F40, because you have to be razor sharp with it the whole time, and you know, when you accelerate with it, you respect it, and you be very gentle with that throttle because it will bite you, and you just don't want to put yourself, and the whole sensation of that, the thrill, the fear, is the kick, I suppose, in a weird way, but it is, and to look at it, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful thing, it's, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it gives you the goose pimples and the sweaty palms and all the rest of it when you're driving it. You just can't help it, really. But that was, yeah, the thing at the Ferrari dealer at the time was just, that was just something else, and I was sold on it from that point on, really. So we went through a period of buying and selling F40s, F50s, 288 GTO, all the special stuff when it was within reach of mortal man. And at the end of this particular year, every time we sold an F40, you needed another £50,000 to buy the next one, and you know, you kept looking at it thinking, are these things going to keep going up? And they just kept going up and up and up, and it just gets to a point where I couldn't keep up on my own anymore, and it was the one that was left over at the end of the year, and I literally I rang the bank manager and said, I need some help. And remortgaged the house. I just did everything and anything I could to get the funds together, and turned up with it at home on the driveway and said to my wife, "Look what I've gone and done," you know, sort of thing, and that was it. you know, and that's how it became about it. But I mean, we loved it. I mean, we've bought and sold a few of these over the years, but they got to the point where we couldn't keep up. Oh, I couldn't keep up. I haven't got the cash for it. So, but yeah. So I thought, no, I'm going to hang on to this for a bit and see what happens. And then, of course, it got to the end of like 2011. I'm looking at it thinking, oh, it has gone up a little bit. And 2012, and okay, yeah, fine. And by that time, we'd got married and all the rest of it. And the car was part of the family. And, you know, you just think, no, I love it. And, you know, if you sell it, what am I going to buy then? What am I going to do then? Because, you know, if you've got the dream car, and you use it, and it's not like you sit there and stare at it. And if I did sell it, what on earth would I have instead? And there's nothing that you know, without getting into like, you know, ludicrous money. But I mean, there's nothing that I could look at and think, oh yeah, I really fancy that. You know, the modern day supercars they just don't do it for me like that does. So that's that really. Okay, so this is a 1991 car. It started life as a cat car, non-adjustable suspension, and as quite often with a lot of these cars, the early history is a little bit unclear. We've got the details of who owned the car, who supplied it. There's, you know, some service history and stuff, but quite often, I think with buying F40s particularly, you need to become a bit of a detective with each car. So you've got the paperwork over here, and that's great, but actually you've got to look at the car because so many of them have had not a great life. Some of them have had accident damage that nobody wants you to know about. Some people disconnected speedo cables on gearboxes and used to drive around Europe and then bring them home again. Lots of that sort of stuff went on. So you've got to look at them and make your own mind up as to whether you think it's a good, authentic car or not. So the guy that owned this car before me, if I'm allowed to call him an old fella, he was 70 odd. He was a French guy, lovely fella, and he'd owned the car since 1998. So when I met him in 2010, and I actually bought the car from a Ferrari main dealer in Europe, but I said I want to meet the guy that owned the car previously. So we had this big thing when we all, you know, got together and everything else, and that sort of thing. And it was kind of nice because he really appreciated the fact that I wanted to meet him. And we had a lovely afternoon about talking about the car, and it just really, really helps relax me as a buyer when I'm spending my every last penny that I've got and everyone else's money I could borrow. And the dealer was great, but I spent 2 days looking at the car. So I stayed over in a hotel. Spent the first day, I was crawling underneath it. You have it up in the air and you're pulling it to bits. And making sure that all the carbon's in the right place, and is that painted black? Should it be black? Should it be this? Should it be that? And you're just going over it as much as you possibly can. The cars do have little numbers stamped in different places, and I want to make sure that all those numbers were right. And I drove it, and I thought, yeah, no, it's all okay. And you're kind of like this about it, but it all worked out to be okay, really. And put it in a trailer and brought it home and looked at it a little bit more, and then thought, no, come on, it's all right. And you just become more and more relaxed about it. Actually, no, that's not true. I'm never relaxed about it. There's always things that bother me about it, but it's just that kind of car, I think, because you can't be perfect, because then you're not going to drive it. But I'm the kind of person that the little bits do annoy me, but you just have to kind of think, well, whatever. The first drive I had was, as I say, with Dash at Loughborough, and I remember never forgetting putting his foot down and the boost and the turbos, and the whole thing just took off. And then when it was my first drive of the car, you have to be mindful all the time of the fact that you've got a steering wheel, you've got a throttle pedal, and you've got some brakes, and you are on your own. So, and the thing is, you can never tell. And even now, when you drive it now, a couple of weeks ago, dry roads, third gear, put your foot down, in comes the boost. I was nowhere near flat. I was like half throttle, and it just starts to go like this, and it just reminds you that it does that, and you just got to be super, super careful. But again, it's back to the thrill of, sweaty palms and, all that sort of stuff that you get when you're a bit on edge, I suppose. Upgrades. Okay, so I haven't done any upgrades to it, with the exception of the exhaust, because the standard silencer that it had was this great big thing. It was huge, and the amount of heat that it created in the back of the car was too much. And it's made of carbon. They do go up in flames, as we see every now and again. And of course, the one thing that scares you about it is the fact that the car's going to catch fire. So when I first had it and I had this exhaust at the back of it, the fact that it was too quiet was annoying, but you kind of forgave the fact that it was too quiet for the flames that it threw out the back of the car, which at night time going through tunnels was spectacular. But the heat that was created at the back of the car, we got to the point where you couldn't touch the back of the car. It was too hot, so the whole frying egg on the back of the car. And I'm thinking, this is crazy, because it's just going to go up in flames. So tubey exhaust or whatever is the most obvious thing. Couldn't find what I wanted. So I've got a friend in the motorsport world, and he custom made an exhaust for me. Did a cracking job of it. So now it sounds brilliant. The flames aren't quite so dramatic, but that's probably for the better. But the back of the car is now the right temperature and not dangerously hot all the time. But other than that, I'm leaving it well alone. The cold start noise the car makes is one level, but as it gets hot, at about 4,000 RPM, the sound, the noise that the car makes changes quite a lot, and that's quite. It's just quite a nice noise, but when you're out on the road and you open it up, the noise from it is it's sensational, loud, but it's really good, really good. On cold start particularly, like say if I reverse the car out of the driveway in the morning, drive down to the bottom of the road, which isn't very far, so I'm in first gear, I might get up to like 3,000 RPM, that's it. You let off the throttle and it pops, cracks and bangs really loudly. Now it'll do it more when it's cold than it will when it's hot. In fact, it does it particularly when it's cold. But my car runs quite rich, and because of that, again, when you're slowing down, when you lift off the throttle, and you get flames that pop out the back of it, and it pops and cracks and bangs and what have you, and it's hilarious. It's entertaining, it's head turning, all that sort of stuff. And there was one of our clients locally, and I was going down the A46. And he'd purposely slowed down so that I could go past him. I didn't know who he was. But as I went past him, I went over the crest of the hill, and I let off the throttle, but I went over the hill, and it just shot this great big flame out the back of the car, and you just think, oh, that's brilliant. It's so good, and that's just, not much stuff does that, I suppose. So it's very point and shoot in terms of the drive of it. But, so when you're driving this car down the road, you are having to watch out for potholes, cat's eyes, anything that will change the direction of the car, because the car will change direction all by itself if you've got an uneven road, or if you've got, like the way that lorries sometimes set little grooves in the road, that sort of stuff. There's no finesse to it. It's it's just raw. It belongs on a track, on a smooth surface, rather than on an open road. It's difficult to drive on the open road because, of course, you're on the wrong side of the car. But all of that just adds to the whole, isn't this cool kind of thing about it. And even with the exhaust system that it's got, the turbos make a loud noise. That's kind of exciting. In fact, my daughter was in the car with me at the weekend saying to me, "What's that whistling, chirping noise?" And they go, "Well, actually, it's it's this, that." And then we start talking about turbos. There's lots of things about the car that anyone would find fascinating. But you've just I can't go on about it enough. The throttle pedal, you've just got to be bit at a time, and not do that with it, because it'll end in a big mess, But it will dart and change gear. You've got to have both hands on the steering wheel all the time. You just, again, it's like being on a motorbike in terms of the focus of making sure that you're 100% paying attention to what's going on. The Golf R would murder it up to 4,000 RPM. I think most things would have a go at it up to 4. The Range Rover would probably have a go at it. There's loads of lag. So, you can drive around that. But if I was in fourth gear at 2,000 RPM and I wanted to put my foot down because I wanted to overtake something, you're going to read a book before the thing cuts in. So you've got to just drive the car, and that's again, it's the excitement of it. So when you're going to overtake something, be ready to overtake it. So you're in the right gear and you're on boost and it's going to go, and and all that sort of stuff. So there's no flat with the paddle and off you go. It's you've got to really drive it. And that's just what it's all about. But it's, yeah, the noises that it makes are really distinctive noise, There's always a degree of nervousness, I think, about driving it. There's a degree of nervousness about, I don't want to damage it, you know, stone chips and things. Well, it's getting stone chips and I'm going to have to deal with that at some point. There's nothing I can do about it, really. But every time I'm in it, you sit there and you start smiling to yourself. You know, aren't I a lucky boy? Isn't this incredible? Isn't this amazing? And you do have a right bottom lip wobbling moment over the whole thing because it is absolutely knockout. And, you know, so that always comes back to the, are you going to sell it thing? Well, no, I don't want to sell it, thanks very much. I'm sure I will at some point, or I'll have to, or whatever. But while I've got it, I'm driving it and I'm just going to have as much fun with it as I possibly can. But it's as I say, it's part of the family. And at home, I've only got a single car garage at home. So I always have this massive tantrum at the beginning of the spring when I want to bring the car home from being here at work and I want to have it home in the garage. And I literally throw everything else out of the garage because I don't want anything to fall on it. I don't want to touch it, and I hide the key for the garage, all that sort of stuff. And but it's the whole thing. It's an emotional car to have because you love it. I kind of like. I love messing with cars. I love cars that are basic cars. So like the Cortina we race, we do all the prep work for that here. I love getting involved and doing all of that. From when I was a kid, I was building cars in the garage. I was building engines. I was painting cars. I was doing all that sort of stuff, and I just quite like the fact that I maintain it. I enjoy it. You know more about it than anybody. And look, every now and again you get a bit stuck, and when I get stuck, I'll ring a man that knows and say, "Can you help me out with this? Because I don't know what to do with it." But I mean, it's basic stuff. And what tipped me over the edge with it was because when I first had it, and it had all the history of servicing in France and in Germany, and then I brought it over here and I took it to a Ferrari dealer, and I'm watching them through the window servicing the car. And I can see the guy, he's lifted the back of the car up and he's done an oil change or what have you. And I watched him dipping the oil, measuring the oil level. I looked at him and I thought, you haven't done that right at all. And I see him stood there scratching his head thinking, it hasn't got any oil in it. I thought, and you can see he's like, I'll put some oil in it. Where's it all gone? And he's doing this with it. And I'm thinking, that's not how you do it. And the guy didn't know how to dip the oil. I'm thinking, right, enough. So from that point on, I thought, no, stuff that. We're going to do it. And so, overalls on and we all get stuck into it. And it's not difficult. It's not difficult to do. I mean, we've just taken all the dampers off it, sent them away, had them all redone, put them all back on. And it's basic mechanics, okay? So the only time I get stuck with it is if I've got an electrical problem, because I haven't got the all the plug-in stuff for it. But that's once in 10 years I got stuck with that. And the rest of it's pretty basic stuff, really. And that's kind of the appeal to owning it. So you fast forward then to stuff like like LaFerraris or stuff that's all of a sudden got batteries and things in it. I mean, forget it. I'm never going to be able to do anything with stuff like that. But with this is not an expensive car to maintain and look after, really. And it's just kind of the whole buzz for me that. And someone said to me, "Oh, you'll kill the value of it." No, I won't. No, I absolutely won't kill the value of it because the person that buys this car from me will love it as much as I do and will totally understand the fact that I didn't want anyone else to do it. I just wanted to do my own thing with it. And I like the fact that you learn loads about it and it's just a familiar thing, so why not? Memorable trips with the car. I mean, the gathering at Silverstone was something else, because there was so many cars there, all lined up, all going around Silverstone together, and I've got a photograph actually, which I took of the car in the pit lane before we went out, where I could make out the number plate of the back of my car, surrounded by all these other cars, and it's just such a brilliant photograph. And actually, I remember when we were there, and everyone's cars were lined up. And some people drove the cars there, some people had their cars trailered there, what have you. But I remember actually there was one guy who he'd just bought his car from one of the F40 specialists in the UK, and I remember him going round the car picking faults with it. Now the guy didn't drive the car there; it was trailered there, but he was going round saying this isn't clean, that's not. And I looked at him and I thought, oh come on, And I thought he's probably going to drive the car around the circuit, put it back in the trailer, and never ever get in it again, sort of thing. But but the Silverstone thing was mega. There were so many cars there. It was a really amazing bit of history to be a part of. But other than that, I mean, when you talk about memorable trips with the car, it's always memorable, right? So you can't, if I'm sitting there thinking, what can I think of something that's really, really specific? But it's actually every time you go out in it. A lot of it is to do with other people's reactions when they see the car. And that's nice, you know, because you get the people that really, really appreciate it, especially like, you know, I don't know, young kids with cameras and stuff, and you're always popping the headlights up and waving them and stuff like that. But it creates a load of attention. I've had people overtaking me on the motorway, and the passengers leaning out the window trying to get a photograph of the car, you know, that sort of thing. You get the guys in the Seat Cupras who are wheel spinning next to you, and they want to, you know, and all that sort of stuff, right? You just let it all go. But it's always a memorable thing. And you know, and people's appreciation of it is great. That's a really nice thing. But it's always a knockout. It's always a knockout thing to do. But I mean, I've been out in the car with a pal of mine who's got an XJ220. That was really cool, the two cars going together. I've been out before with a friend who had an F40 as well, and we were driving along together. So having two together, I mean, come on, you know. So all that sort of stuff, it's mega. It really is. That's a good question. My F50 story would be that I went to Germany, I bought an F50, and I got in the this F50 in like 3,000 miles from you. And it was absolutely perfect, carbon weave, blah, blah, blah. It was gorgeous. And this fella I bought the car off was sort of saying, you know, when's the transporter turning up? And I was like, no, I got my bag with me, and I'll put the bag in the car. And this bloke was just distraught that I was going to drive this car home. So me and a pal jumped in this F50 and we drove it home. And we drove it all the way up through Germany, back through France, and what have you, stopped over in Rheims on the way back. And the F50 to drive is great. It's incredible. The noise it makes, the gearbox, everything about the whole history of what that car is, 110%, it's incredible. The F50 on the motorway at speed, steady as a rock, no problem whatsoever. You're cruising along, and then it rains, and it's no different. It's still steady, it's still awesome, and you can be totally relaxed with the fact that the car will drive and do everything that you expect it to do. If I was in the car on the motorway and it started to rain and I was in that, I would be thinking, oh, I'm not very happy about this, because you've got that kind of, it's the way, that's just aggressive in the way its power delivery is. The F50 will behave itself beautifully, nice and smooth. That feels like it's all or nothing. I mean, you can drive it as tame as you want to drive it, but that would be the thing that would bother me. I wouldn't fancy driving that in the rain particularly. I mean, I could and I have, but I'm not going to want to. But in the F50, I remember we drove through this absolute rainstorm, and we sat there, steady as a rock, no problem whatsoever. And we had an F50 once that had a straight-through exhaust system on it. That was just ear-splittingly amazing. The F50s drive great. It's a totally different driving experience to the 40. I think that I'd be like this about the two of them. That's just got more of a fear factor in it. The way that looks for me, I way prefer over the F50, and it's thrilling. And it's more. There's so much about that I prefer over the F50. The way that it drives, the way the boost kicks in, the way that it looks, you know, the pop-up headlights, just all of it. And the F50's looks are a bit Marmite. Not everyone's going to go for it, but when you've driven an F50, you get it, totally get it. It's a knockout car. It's incredible. I'd love to say that I'll keep it forever, but the problem with the car is that it's a selfish thing to have, in as much as wife, 2 children, and all the rest of it. So all of a sudden you start looking at, because life's all about memories, isn't it? Creating good memories and what have you. But it's something that you want to do with everyone else. So at the weekend we were at home. So everyone's we're taking turns having a go in the car. But I'm punching above my weight with it. It's going to get to the point whereby the car's worth an amount of money that, wow, I mean, what can I possibly do with that? Maybe I don't know. I'd love to say that I'm going to keep it forever, but I don't know. You don't know what's around the corner, do you? But it'll be a sad day when it goes. if it goes. Don't know. We'll see.